certainly. Mr. Speechcraft Master, fellow Toastmasters, and guests. Today I'm going to talk about giving an evaluation, which is an incredibly important part of Toastmasters. When you think of Toastmasters, you think of giving speeches. But I think one of the most unique things that makes Toastmasters a special organization is the feedback that you get after you give a speech. We've all been in situations when we listen to a speech. You know, it might be a sermon, it might be a lecture, whatever. And it could just use an awful lot of improvement. I mean, it's kind of a boring speech, and you're sitting there and it's kind of like listening and watching paint dry or something. And as you're leaving the auditorium or whatever, you run into the speaker. And you really feel like saying, wow, you could do this and this and this and make your speech a little bit better. But you don't say that, do you? You take the polite route and you say, that was a good speech, I really enjoyed it. And I think that's probably the thing to do, at least that's what I do. But it's not the time or the place to give an evaluation. But Toastmasters is that place. And that's what makes Toastmasters so special. Now, I have a disclaimer before I talk a little bit about giving an effective evaluation. I need to tell you that I am not the best evaluator in the world. There's lots of evaluators, lots of Toastmasters here are much better. So I'm not preaching at you today, I'm preaching at myself as well, okay? But how do we give an evaluation? How do we do it? How do we give an effective evaluation? It all starts before the speech. When you're giving a speech, you hand your evaluator a manual, generally, and there's an objective that you're trying to accomplish. It might be organizing your speech effectively, or using vocal variety, or maybe it's using visual aids. And so, as an evaluator, you want to look at the objective and say, okay, well, we're talking about this today. That's what he's trying to accomplish. Look at the questions there so that you can give an effective evaluation. But even more importantly, something that Toastmasters brought out to me was ask the speaker, hey, is there anything you want me to look for in your speech today? Because perhaps that speaker, even though he's talking about organizing his speech or using vocal variety, perhaps that person uses his notes an awful lot, and he wants to try to get away from that. And so if you ask him, you'll know. Other than that, you're not going to know, are you? So it all begins before the speech. The second thing is during the speech, show interest. And this kind of sounds like a no-brainer, but watch what they're doing and focus on them. If you are a speaker, it is very disconcerting when you see your evaluator and he looks bored. It just makes me nervous. I don't know if it does the rest of you, but you really want to know that your evaluator is locked in on you. And so it's very important to show some interest, okay? And then when you actually give your evaluation, remember three things. The first is, tell the speaker what you saw. Second is, tell the speaker what you heard. And third is, tell the speaker what you felt. Three keys. Here's a couple of other things to keep in mind. First of all, personalize it. Don't act like you're the ultimate authority on giving evaluations. Instead of saying you didn't, or you shouldn't, or you failed to, say things like, I believe, my reaction was, or I suggest that. Another thing to keep in mind is evaluate the speech, not the person. To give you a really ridiculous example, if I'm giving an evaluation, I wouldn't want to say, your clothes don't match today, and you really should do something about that. That's ridiculous, okay? Sometimes there's a gray line though, because you might have to talk about body language. There's a good way to do this and a bad way to do this. You know, if the speaker is up here, and he's gripping the platform like this, or the podium, you might want to say something like, I noticed that you were gripping the podium a lot, and I kind of felt that you were nervous, and you know, that's perfectly okay. This is your first speech, it's your second speech, it's totally understandable, but it's something that you may need to work on in the future. It would not be appropriate to say, wow, I'll tell you what, you were as white as a sheet. I could tell you were scared to death. And when you let go of the podium, there was like inventions in the podium. Wouldn't be a good thing to say. Another thing is evaluate the speech and not the topic. I'm going to pick on my evaluator for a second. John, if John was going to give a speech entitled 3 Reasons Why I Think Mitt Romney is going to be President Obama this fall, I might totally disagree with him, but it's not my place to say, John, I totally disagree with what you said up there. That's irrelevant. I'm going to be critiquing John on his delivery, not on what he actually said. Another thing is avoid being disingenuous. To use another ridiculous illustration, as an evaluator, you'll want to get up and say, wow, that was one of the greatest speeches I ever heard, if indeed it really wasn't. If you give false praise, you're really not doing the speaker a lot of good. You see what I'm saying? Because the speaker might think that they've arrived, and they really haven't, and there's room for improvement. Last but not least, always end on a high note. A fellow Toastmaster once told me that when he gives an evaluation, what he does is he starts off by praising and complimenting the speaker and telling them what they did well, and he ends that way as well. And sandwiched in between the two, he has some constructive criticism, how you can improve your speech. That's something to keep in mind. In conclusion, giving an effective evaluation will help that person become a better speaker. I remember a long time ago, Shirley Hendrick, who's not here today, she evaluated one of my speeches, and when she gave the evaluation, she said, Mac, I noticed that the whole time you were giving that speech, you were clearing your throat. And I couldn't tell if maybe you're sick or you had allergies or something, which I do, I have some allergy issues. But she said, it sounded to me like you were nervous, and that's how you were, that was the outlet there, and it was very distracting to the speech. And I got to thinking about that, asked my wife about it, asked some other people about it, and sure enough, when I'm nervous and I'm uncomfortable, I clear my throat an awful lot. And you may have even noticed it today. I'm sure I've done it a couple of times. But hopefully, because she pointed it out to me at a Toastmasters meeting, it's helped me improve and kind of overcome that hurdle a little bit. So that's just a personal example of how an evaluation can make you a better speaker. But so how important are evaluations? They're very important. If you give a good evaluation, you'll become a better speaker, and it equals a more successful club. Mr. Speechcraft Master.
Thank you, Mr. Speechcraft Master, fellow Toastmasters, and Speechcrafters. An evaluation on a speech about evaluation. Where to begin? First of all, I have to admit, I've heard this speech already. Second of all, the time you gave the speech before was not nearly as good as the time you gave it now. You used your body movement, your vocal variety, your eye contact was wonderful with the audience. Your hand gestures were wonderful. Everything flowed seamlessly throughout your speech. One of the questions they ask in the evaluation is your use of notes. And you had a very, very effective technique for how to use your notes. You would be standing over here and you would talk for 1 or 2 minutes about a particular part of your speech. And when you wanted to transition to a new part of your speech, you would just kind of casually just walk past the lectern and come over here. And you would have the next part of your speech in your mind because you picked it up as you walk past the lectern. And I thought that was a wonderful, wonderful technique for using your notes. Very unobtrusive, very non-invasive to the audience. You weren't sitting here looking down and saying, what am I going to talk about next? Excellent, excellent. The one part of your speech that is really being nitpicked And that is, and it goes back to a man that Charlie and I know, or knew, he has since passed away, from our other club that we both belonged to. And he had a pet peeve about the proper use of lecterns and podiums. And his peeve was that many people mistake a lectern and call it a podium. A podium is something you would climb up onto to stand behind the lectern to give your speech. That's the only thing that I can find fault, is that you confuse lectern and podium, which a lot of people do, and I know I did until this member that I talked about gave a specific speech on using podium and lectern properly. The best part of your speech was where you talked about you do not critique the person. You only critique. You critique the speech. You don't critique the message. And using myself as an example, that was wonderful because it is so true. I mean, somebody can give a speech that you are in total opposition to. But if they give an effective speech, you may even start seeing some merit to what they're saying. And so, listening to what somebody has to say is a very, very important part of an evaluation. And I think that you left everybody with that message. So again, give this speech anytime for a Speechcraft class, and people will walk away knowing a lot more about giving evaluations. Mr. Speechcraft master.